I was standing in the back of the hall. No one noticed me. I wasn't part of the pictures, the handshakes, or the praise. That day was all about my little brother, Leo. The golden child. The one my parents always bragged about. Then, right after Leo got his award, his colonel stopped talking mid-sentence. He looked across the room, straight at me. He walked over with purpose. Wait, he asked, you're the brigade commander? The room froze. Everyone turned. Even my parents went silent. That was the first time anyone in my family looked at me like I mattered. And I wish I could say it felt good. But all I felt was anger, because for years, they told everyone I failed. My name is Kayla Rivers. I'm 28 years old. I serve as a brigade commander in the U.S. Army. It's taken me over a decade of training, sacrifice, and proving myself over and over again to get here, but to my family, I'm still just Leo's older sister. Growing up in southern Georgia, my dad was big on discipline. He was Army too, old school. In our house, boys were expected to lead, and girls were expected to support. That's just how it was. My little brother, Leo, could do no wrong. He was funny, athletic, charming, the kind of kid people are drawn to. At school, teachers loved him. At home, my parents called him their champ. I was different. I liked books. I liked quiet. I joined ROTC in high school and pushed myself hard. I wasn't chasing praise, I just wanted to be good at something. But no matter what I achieved, it never seemed to matter to them. When I got into West Point, my mom told people I was taking some military classes. When I became an officer, my dad said, that's cute, but real work is in the field. They never asked about my job, my rank, or what I did. When family friends asked, my mom would say, Kayla works somewhere on base, I think it's paperwork. It's like they couldn't imagine me doing anything serious. Meanwhile, Leo joined the Army a few years after me. My parents made a huge deal about it. They told the whole neighborhood, posted on Facebook, went to every ceremony. My mom cried with pride when he graduated basic training. I've led troops through multi-state operations. I've written policy. I've had people's lives in my hands, but they never showed up for a single one of my ceremonies. Not even once. So when I heard Leo was getting an award and that my whole family would be there, I didn't want to go. Not because I didn't care, but because I already knew how it would feel, being invisible in a room full of people who think they already know who you are. Still, I went. Not for them. For Leo. I put on my uniform. I showed up early. I stood in the back of that hall, trying not to be seen. What happened next, I'll never forget. I arrived early and parked far from the main building. I wanted to avoid walking in with my parents. I didn't want to hear my mom fussing about her shoes or my dad complaining about traffic. More than anything, I didn't want to deal with their fake smiles when they saw me. Inside, the ceremony hall was bright and echoey, with rows of white folding chairs and a stage up front. There were banners hanging on the walls, honor, courage, commitment, the same words I had carried with me for years. I stayed near the back, standing just beside the last row. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to look too comfortable. Part of me felt like I didn't belong there. Not because of the uniform I wore, but because of the family I was standing behind. I saw them come in about 10 minutes later. My mom, Valerie, wore a tight black dress like she was headed to a wedding. Her heels clicked across the floor. My dad, Greg, wore his Army veteran cap and a crisp polo shirt with Leo's picture printed on the chest. And then came Leo, smiling wide. In his Army dress blues. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. They took seats in the front row, chatting with other families. I overheard my mom talking to a woman sitting next to her. My son's getting an Army Achievement Medal today. We're just so proud, she said. Then she added, our daughter's here too. She works in admin, I think. Quiet girl. I closed my eyes. There it was again. That same lie. Not just that I wasn't doing anything important, but that I was barely worth mentioning at all. I don't know why it still hurt after all these years. Maybe I still hoped they'd eventually see me. Maybe I was foolish to think today would be any different. As the ceremony began, the speaker called out names one by one. Young soldiers stepped up to receive their medals. Families clapped and cheered. Cameras flashed, then they called Leo, Sergeant Leo Rivers. The room applauded. Louder for him. My mom leapt up with her phone, recording every second. My dad nodded proudly, his arms crossed over his chest. Leo looked happy, truly happy. And even with everything I felt, I couldn't hate him for that. He wasn't the problem. Not really. That he gave a short speech, just a thank you to his unit. And a mention of our parents. They've supported me since day one, he said. I wouldn't be here without them. I wasn't surprised I didn't get a mention. I wasn't expecting one. But the part that stung the most wasn't what Leo said. It was what my mom whispered afterward, loud enough for those around her to hear. Our Leo really made something of himself. We were worried for a while. Unlike our daughter. She had all the grades, but never the heart. I felt my stomach tighten. My hands curled into fists at my sides. What heart did she think it took to get where I was? What kind of person did they think I had become? I thought about leaving right then. I almost did. I even took a step toward the exit. But then I stopped, not because I wanted revenge. Not even because I wanted to be recognized. But because I didn't want to let their ignorance drive me out of a room I had every right to be in. I stood a little straighter. My uniform was pressed. My boots were spotless. My badge read, Brigade Commander, U.S. Army. They could ignore me all they wanted. That didn't change the truth, and the truth was about to find them, because standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the last award get handed out, was Colonel Duncan, the man who had led 3 battalions through overseas operations. A man who knew every leader on base, and when his eyes landed on me, I saw it. Recognition. Surprised that he stepped off the stage and started walking directly toward me. My parents were still smiling, still laughing, completely unaware that everything was about to shift. They had told the world I was a nobody. But now someone who mattered was about to speak my name, and for the first time in my life, they would have to listen. Colonel Duncan didn't just glance my way. He was walking directly toward me now, with sharp, confident steps like he was on a mission. I knew that walk. I'd seen it in the field, during inspections, in moments that demanded leadership and clarity. This wasn't small talk. He was coming with purpose. At first, I thought maybe he was heading past me to someone else. I stepped slightly aside, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. He stopped just a few feet away, his expression somewhere between surprise and admiration. You're Rivers, right? He asked. Kayla Rivers? I nodded. Yes, sir. He tilted his head, then gave a quick smile. Brigade Commander. I knew I recognized you. I felt every head within 10 feet turn. Some people leaned in. A few soldiers behind me straightened up. The name, Brigade Commander, didn't go unnoticed. It was the kind of title people respected. The kind that carried weight, especially here. Yes, sir, I said again, calmly. I'm with the 325th. He chuckled lightly. What are you doing all the way in the back? You hiding from your troops? I smiled politely. Just here to support my brother, sir. Colonel Duncan turned and looked toward the front row, where my family sat. My dad was now watching us, his posture stiff. My mom had lowered her phone and was squinting in our direction, probably unsure what was going on but sensing it was important. Well, Duncan said loudly enough for others to hear, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to one of the best officers I've had the honor to work with, Commander Kayla Rivers. Her leadership on base has saved us more than once. You'd be amazed what this woman can do under pressure. The conversations around us went quiet. People turned in their seats. I saw Leo twist in his chair to look behind him. His face was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. My parents sat completely still. I didn't move. I didn't look down. I didn't try to shrink myself. I just stood there, shoulders square, heart pounding hard beneath my uniform. Not from nerves. From something else, something like justice. Colonel Duncan turned back to me. You mind joining me up front for a moment? Part of me wanted to say no. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to stand next to my brother and feel like I was stealing his day. But I also realized something important. This moment wasn't about proving anything to my parents. It wasn't about taking attention from Leo. It was about owning who I was, finally, fully, and allowing the truth to speak for itself. So I nodded. Yes, sir. As we walked toward the stage, I could feel the eyes on me. The crowd parted slightly as we passed. Soldiers gave small nods of respect. Some even stepped aside instinctively. My boots clicked against the floor. Each step felt heavier, but more solid. Like I wasn't carrying shame anymore, just my truth. When I reached the front, Colonel Duncan shook my hand and then faced the crowd. Not every leader wears a loud voice. Some earn respect by actions, not words. Commander Rivers has led over 2,000 soldiers. She's carried responsibility. Most of us will never understand. And I'm damn proud to have her in my command. There was a beat of silence. Then, slowly, people began to clap. Not a huge burst of applause, but enough to let me know they understood. Enough to let me know I was seen. I glanced down at Leo. He was staring up at me, wide-eyed. He mouthed something, just one word, "What?" I gave him a small nod. I didn't need to explain. He was putting it together. The uniform. The badge. The way people looked at me now. As I stepped down from the stage, I passed my parents. My dad didn't speak. His mouth was tight, jaw clenched. My mom looked confused, almost hurt, like someone had stolen her story and rewritten it without asking. But they didn't say a word, and that silence was louder than anything they could have said. Leo stood up and came toward me. For the first time in a long time, we looked at each other without the weight of comparison between us. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. "I didn't think it mattered," I said. "It does now," he replied. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because maybe, finally, someone in my family was starting to see me, not as an idea or an obligation, but as the woman I had fought to become. As I stood there beside Leo, still dressed in full uniform, it felt like the air in the room had thickened. Not in a bad way, but in that still, heavy silence that comes right before something shifts for good. I looked out over the audience. Some were still watching me, some had turned to whisper to each other, and a few soldiers gave small nods of respect. But I wasn't looking for applause. I wasn't looking for anything, really. For the first time in years, I felt completely steady, grounded in who I was. I glanced at my parents. My mom was frozen in her seat, lips slightly parted, still trying to process what had just happened. She had always been quick with words, quick to fill silence with stories, bragging, or soft corrections to fit the image she wanted to project. But now, she had nothing. Her version of the story had cracked, and she didn't know how to cover it. My dad's face was harder to read. His arms were crossed, jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. Not with pride. Not with anger. Just confusion. Maybe a little disbelief. Maybe, just maybe, regret. Leo stepped closer and leaned toward me. His voice was low, like he was afraid of saying it too loud. "You're a commander? Like, over a brigade? For real?" I looked at him. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment. Just truth. "Yeah. For real." He ran a hand over his jaw, still trying to understand. "How long?" 3 years. I started leading small units, moved up fast. I've deployed twice. Managed operations in 4 states. I've written and revised policy. I've led thousands of troops under pressure you wouldn't believe. Leo blinked. "And you never told Mom and Dad?" "They never asked." That answer seemed to hit him. I saw it in his face. The realization. The quiet guilt that creeps in when you realize you've been part of a lie without meaning to be. "You should have been up there first," he said, eyes scanning the stage. "You've done way more than I have." I shook my head gently. "This day was for you. I didn't come here to be seen. I just didn't want to disappear anymore." He was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice that was clearer than I'd heard from him all day, he said, "You're the reason I joined, you know." I turned to look at him, confused. "You were always so focused. So strong. Even when no one saw it." "I did. I watched you. I wanted to be like that. Like you. I just figured, since Mom and Dad never talked about you, I didn't know if it was okay to say that out loud." Those words landed with a weight I wasn't expecting. For so long, I'd been carrying this idea that even Leo had forgotten me. That he only cared about the praise and the spotlight. But here he was, standing beside me, quietly handing me something I hadn't received from anyone in my family in years, recognition. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how to. So instead, I placed a hand on his shoulder and nodded. As we stood there, the ceremony began to wind down. Chairs scraped the floor as people stood. Conversation started. Again. But the energy in the room had shifted. I wasn't a shadow anymore. People saw me. And more importantly, I saw myself. We walked toward the exit together, Leo and I. My parents followed behind, a few steps slower, saying nothing. Outside, the sun had started to set. The sky was streaked with orange and gold. I looked at Leo. No, you earned your award today. Don't let anyone take that from you. He looked down, then back up. Yeah. But I've got a long way to go if I want to come close to what you've done. I didn't need that praise. But it didn't hurt. Either. As we walked toward the parking lot, my mom called out behind us. Kayla. I stopped and turned. She paused in front of me, looking unsure. Her voice was softer than usual. Why didn't you tell us? There was no anger in my reply. Just honesty. Because every time I tried, you changed the subject. Or turned it into a joke. Or made me feel like it didn't matter. She nodded slowly. I didn't know. I really didn't know. I believe that, I said. But it doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And then I left it there. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need validation. That moment wasn't about what they owed me. It was about what I finally gave myself. I had stood in the back of the room thinking I was invisible. But the truth is, I never needed to be seen by them. I only needed to stop hiding. The drive back that evening was quiet. I didn't turn on music. I didn't make any calls. I just let the silence sit with me. For the first time in a long time, without trying to push it away, I thought about how many years I had carried the weight of being invisible in my own family. How often I had downplayed my success to keep the peace. How I had learned to expect disappointment before anyone even opened their mouth. But something had shifted that day. Not just for them, for me. I had walked into that ceremony expecting nothing. No congratulations, no questions, no recognition. I had prepared myself, like always, to be the quiet supporter, the shadow in the room. But in the end, I wasn't given the spotlight. I earned it. Not through a speech or a demand. Through who I had become. Through everything I had done when no one was watching. That was the part that stayed with me. The fact that the most powerful moment didn't come from finally getting their approval. It came from realizing I didn't need it. There was a time in my life when I would have done anything for my dad to say, "I'm proud of you." Or for my mom to tell her friends about my real job and what it took to get there. I craved that kind of love, the loud, public kind that makes you feel seen. But what I've learned is that love doesn't always come in the way you expect it. And recognition doesn't always come from the people you grew up wanting it from. Sometimes it comes from a stranger who sees your badge and understands exactly what it took to earn it. Sometimes it comes from a younger brother, quietly admitting that you were his first role model, and sometimes it doesn't come at all, not in words, at least, but that doesn't mean you aren't worthy. After that day, things with my family didn't magically change. My mom didn't suddenly become warm and open. My dad didn't start bragging about me to his old army friends. But the silence between us felt different. It wasn't so full of misunderstanding. It wasn't so heavy with shame. Leo and I started talking more. He'd call and ask questions, real questions. About leadership, about decision-making, about what it takes to lead when the pressure is high. He didn't just see me as a sister anymore. He saw me as someone to learn from, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had earned something more valuable than a medal or a title. I had earned respect. Quiet, honest respect. One evening, a few weeks after the ceremony, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar, my mom's. Inside was a short note. It read, "Kayla, I don't always understand everything you've done, but I realize now I never tried hard enough to learn. I'm sorry I didn't see you before. I'm trying now. Mom." It wasn't a long letter. It didn't fix everything. But it was something. And for my mom, that was more vulnerability than I had ever seen. I pinned that card to the inside of my locker at base. Not because I needed the apology, but because it reminded me of how far I had come. We all have stories that get told about us. Sometimes by our families, sometimes by people who barely know us. But we have the power to rewrite those stories, not with words, but with how we live. For years, I let their version of me shrink who I was. I stayed small. I stood in the back. I wore silence like armor, but I don't do that anymore. I know who I am. I know what I've earned. And I no longer need permission to take up space. So if you're someone who's ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you're not enough, not strong enough, not the right kind of success. Hear this, you don't need them to see you, you just need to stop hiding from yourself, because when the truth comes out, when someone finally calls you forward and speaks your name with respect, you'll realize you were never waiting to be chosen, you were just waiting to stop waiting, and when that moment comes, step forward. Not for them, for you.